And we are recording. So anybody who can't come tonight, if you have a friend missing tonight, please send them this link. It will be on our YouTube, Philly Kai. So if this is your first time joining, or maybe first time in a long time, Philly Kai is a interdisciplinary group. We're actually part of a national larger organization called ACM SIG Chi, which stands for the Association of Computing and Machinery. So we are, committed not just to user experience, but like human computer interaction and other disciplines that fall in between that, like information architecture, for instance. Um, and here at Philly Chi, the Philly chapter, we strive to create fun, unique events that helps unify our community, but also put that educational twist here and there. Here are the board members. You might see them around tonight or in person. We do have a couple of events that Megan, our secretary, will be getting into that we have planned for now until the end of the year. And we look forward to seeing you guys. Shout out to all the other people here. I'm not gonna like run everyone's name here because there's a lot of us, but yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, that's for sure. So last thing to call out is that we really strive to create a safe, supportive environment. And if you witness any unacceptable behavior that doesn't align with our values, like please reach out to us. We do not tolerate that. So yes, our line is always open, phillykai@gmail.com. Or, any one of us, you can reach out to any one of us.
All
Megan,
right.
I'll pass to you.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. My name is Megan Elder. I'm the board secretary of Philly Chi. I just wanted to share with you the upcoming events that we have for this fall. Coming up in the middle of October on the 16th, we're going to have a UX meetup in collaboration with AIGA. We will be sharing the location and time for that date on our Discord and through our email list. On October 21st, we have our annual show and tell. It will be virtual and we are still accepting submissions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. In November, we're going to host a panel for niche specialties in UX. And then in December will be Philly Kai's annual holiday party. So these dates for November and December will be shared soon. Please join our Discord and email list to make sure you receive those details. You can join our Discord by messaging any one of the board members and we will send you an invitation. And then you can join our email list at our website, which is phillykai.org, and scroll all the way down to enter your email in order to be placed on that list. Can I have the next slide, please? And circling back to our show and tell, we have extended the submission deadline and we have changed the event date to give us more time and you more time to share your amazing projects with us. So to submit, please fill out our Google form. I am dropping it into the chat right now with a project, a case study, something exciting that you have worked on and would like to share with the community. The deadline again is October 10th to submit, and this is a virtual event taking place on October 21st. If you have any questions specifically about what types of projects or what we're looking for, please feel free to message any one of the board members for that information. And a shout out to our sponsors. We have Bentley and Rosenfield who continually support Philly Chi and what we do here in our UX community. So thank you very much to those two sponsors. All right, passing it over to Jamie to introduce our fabulous panelists.
Okay, I'm so excited. I'm just going to hand it right over to them. So if we could have our panelists do a quick intro. Let's start with Eve, and then Taylor, and then Celestine.
All right. Hello, guys. I'm Eve Hartwell. I'm a freelance UX designer. I also do front end development. So I've been pretty much in UX freelancing for, I would say, full time a year, but my career really started around the end of high school. So, um, yeah, that's a little rundown about me.
Hey guys, I'm Taylor Wells. As of a month ago, I am working as an experience designer at Think Company, but concurrently and prior to that, I was working as a freelance UX designer for about 3 years. And prior to that, I was working as a children's photographer for about 12 years. So I've always kind of been in a creative, like non 9 to 5 kind of schedule. So happy to talk to you guys about it.
Hey y'all, I'm Celeste. I have been full-time freelance product for about 6 or 7 years now. But total, I guess like about 13 years. So yeah, I kind of have had an interesting journey. I didn't always start in product, but I ended up here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our fourth panelist, Olivia, is still on her way. We will announce when she gets here. But for now, let us move on to the panel questions. We can catch her up. And the first question that I would love to start with is, what did your first freelancing gig look like? And how did you land it? Were you doing any other kind of work at the time? Were you doing a different kind of job plus your freelancing? What did that look like? And we'll start with Eve first, and then Taylor, and then Celestine.
Yeah, so as I kind of briefly mentioned in my intro, I did start at the end of high school, which was my first client. It was a local hair studio. They needed a new website. My mom had been going there for a few years, and they knew that I was interested in web development, but I didn't have like actual like substantial experience just yet. So it was one of those cases of them just betting on me, and I was able to do pretty much a full website redesign for their hair studio in WordPress, and also like working a little bit with code to like integrate their scheduling functions. So it was pretty much like a really well-rounded project. So yeah, I wasn't doing any other work at the time because yeah, it was during school time, but I ended up being able to use that project as my senior project, which was also like kind of somewhat of a factor of me getting into like some of the colleges that I got into. So yeah.
For me, like I said before, I worked as like a school children's photographer uh, for about 12 years. And then the UX was kind of like a side thing, first a hobby, and then I joined a boot camp. And then post boot camp, I was still working for the photography studio. So I did just want some kind of side freelance thing. I got my very first gig just from applying for a bunch of stuff on Upwork. My first job ended up being this ed tech startup because when I was applying to places, I kind of had an emphasis with design systems and they needed someone to help like document and clean up their design system, which was perfect. I got to kind of learn on the job how design systems work. And yeah, like I said before, didn't really have a 9 to 5. So I kind of had a crazy schedule. I would, work for the photo studio from 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then go home and work on my other stuff. So it was crazy but manageable.
For me, I guess I'll kind of skip to the portion where I did do it full time since the story is long. But um, I got my first freelance gig when I was a manager at this coffee shop, and I was telling a regular of mine that I was leaving and I was going back to freelance doing web design and brand. And at the time, she was looking for somebody to help her with her business, and that's how I first uh, got my like a paying client for freelance. And at the time, I was managing the coffee shop location and like two other ones. And then I was kind of going back to just to take classes for interactive media while I was kind of deciding what I was going to do next. So that's kind of how I made the transition into freelance.
Very cool. I love hearing the different paths that people take to get to freelancing. All right, awesome. Thank you for that, all three of you. And the next question I wanted to ask is kind of similar. Um, well, first, I think I want to ask, what is the one thing that you wish you knew before you started freelancing?
I can go. So, I would say, at least being full time this year, getting a long-term client for an AI startup. I really wish that I kind of learned going into the process, like how to advocate for myself as far as project scopes and learning about what is the like the best like price range for your experience because I think that with like imposter syndrome and getting your first like few clients at first, you kind of don't want to be super like pushy or like ask for too much for where your experience is at because you're kind of newer. So I think in my experience, I realized that I could have asked for more for my first like long-term client. And it was mainly because I didn't know it was going to be a long-term assignment. So I think I could have asked for more. And I think that, advocating for yourself at first to like really ask those questions right off the bat will really help you to like have a more balanced project with like your clients so that not only are they getting like a good product but you're also being able to um, be compensated well and be able to take care of yourself with the compensation that you're getting because at the end of the day like as a freelancer you should be able to be well compensated for your work.
I would say first thing I thought of when I saw that question is that it's kind of definitely an exercise in self-discipline and self-reliance. And kind of tying into what you just said, Eve, like you are responsible for you, accountability is on you, as opposed to, some other job where you're working with a team. So it's kind of just a test of making sure that you advocate for yourself and also that, take care of yourself. Like what I was saying in my last answer, like sometimes I would work 12-hour days, but that was my choice.
Yeah, definitely agree with the two prior statements. I think one of the biggest lessons for me was freelancing is also outside of being good at your craft, it's a lot of selling. And I wasn't prepared for that. Like I think the amount of like having to talk about myself and like my skills and like advocating for that and also kind of like if you're trying to win like a project um you really need to kind of massage all of those selling chops and selling, consulting, thinking like on the fly, especially like if you're talking to a client who's trying to vet you, and learning like what motivates this client to sign. Is it like a financial motivation? Is it time bound? Do they have like a big deadline? Kind of like reading in between the lines, like when you do get the chance to talk to them and deciphering like how you want to move next, I think was like the biggest thing.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that last point. I've run into that a lot myself. So the next question is kind of related to the first one. How do you find clients? How have you found clients? What has and has not worked for you when you were trying to find or nail down some clients?
So I think that my experience for finding clients might be a little unique because well, we'll hear from the other panelists, but I'll say from my experience, my only clients, to preface, I've had about 10 clients in the past year, and they all have been word of mouth. I do a lot of networking. Mainly that networking was to find a full-time job, but as a result of just not only going to events, but becoming a host of events. I was hosting Coding Coffee Philly for a year. And within that year, we ended up like having like so many software developers come in and being around so many software developers. A lot of them needed a unique like design voice to like help their startups. So that's how I was offered a UX position for an AI startup in like government procurement. So, and that ended up being one of my longest clients as well. On top of that, I think that, yeah, so like networking, I think also friends, same thing as well as reaching out to the people that you know. A lot of people do need UX help or design help. So I've been doing a lot of projects, mini projects, and kind of larger projects over the year for kind of smaller businesses and startups, and even just like revamping people's portfolios. So um, it really isn't, at least for me, it's never been super linear in the sense of like reaching out coldly to businesses. At least from where my experience is at, it's been a lot easier to kind of show people my work and build a relationship with people rather than, cold applying or something like that.
Yeah, kind of same situation. I did get a few people like through Upwork in the beginning. And one of them that I'm currently working with is through there. But the others, it's they initially hired me for a job and I did good work and they wanted me back. So it's yeah, also just building a relationship with a client and you know, mm, sorry, tongue tied. Yeah, just kind of it kind of just kind of snowballs from there. It's been my experience.
Yeah, echoing what Taylor and Eve said as well. I really, for me, it's a lot of referrals and word of mouth, which I'm very grateful for. I've had, and I'm kind of like it's funny because there was a period of time when I was starting where I was doing a lot of pro bono work because I was just trying to build up my portfolio. And from those, I've landed, countless projects like over the years. So I feel like it wasn't always just people knew me already and then the jobs came. Like I definitely had a lot of kind of ramping up to that. And also nowadays I'm like not shy at all to like ask for referrals from previous clients, especially if I know that we have really good rapport. Where did I go to find my pro bono projects? A lot of them were friends actually. They were either like fully free or barter. So for example, the headshot that I use now, and which is what I use on my website and my LinkedIn, that was a barter website. So the person I made a very simple website for them, which was more of like a portfolio, and then she did my engagement photos and also my brand photos, and I still use them today. And from that one connection, I've landed two other clients since then. And this was like at the beginning from when I first started.
Amazing, amazing. And so Olivia just joined in. Olivia, I don't know if you can hear me. We are on this third question, but if you would like to introduce yourself and then you can answer this question if you'd like, or we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Apologies for being late. So my name is Olivia Bouch. Currently based out of Bentonville, Arkansas. Right now, I am a senior UX designer working on the Walmart team outside of doing a couple other freelance things on the side. But my primarily focus in terms of what it is that I gravitate towards in design is mostly strategic, logic, anything that's analytical. So that's what I gravitate towards. And then just to answer this question in regards to how do I find clients and what has and has not worked for you. So a lot of the clients come from actually having candid personal relationships with them to where you are being transparent, you're showing your skills first. And so a lot of the times it's just from general networking. I find that Twitter, X, whatever everybody wants to call it now, tends to be the platform that many are gravitating towards. And so I will just have open conversations. I'll try to share and engage with people. And then that usually stirs up interest in what I do. And then I promote that or I promote my websites, whatever else that it is. And that usually works off in that way. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily work. It's always hit or miss depending on what you're gravitating towards. So anytime I try to work with people, I try to work with people within my expertise. And if people have other ventures that they want to get into, I will refer them to it. But usually, if I stay within my own bubble, then it works for me. But if it doesn't, then I will just refer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks for the quick introduction and hopping right in. I appreciate it. And that's kind of how the other questions are going to go. We've been having Eve go first, then Taylor, then Celestine, and then you'll go fourth each question. And before I move on to the next one, I want to add in as well, just if this helps anybody. I got one of my big freelancing gigs from going to a hackathon, because sometimes they can still use UX designers. It's not just for coders. And I did a project, and that's how I ended up getting one of my first freelance contracts. So try that as well. The next question that we're gonna go to is I think we did this one already. So let's move on to the next one. How did you learn to prepare for the technical necessities of freelancing, like writing contracts, SOWs, and taxes, things like that?
Yeah, so for me, being a part of groups like this, specifically AIGA, has been a great help in my freelance UX design career. My mentor, Hannah Strayline, has been, I would say she's the answer for this question. As far as like literal like contracts, SOWs, and even figuring out how self-employment taxes work. I would not be able to figure any of that out just by Googling it. It's really not that straightforward. And for anyone who is like interested in this, there's Hannah. Anyone who is interested in going freelance, you really do need a mentor. It's the most like um, helpful way to go about it. You don't want to go through it alone, and you want to make sure you're paying your taxes in time. So I would recommend having a mentor, and that's what has helped me be the most confident as possible going into contracts with new clients.
For me, definitely a lot of online research, kind of just learning as I went along, looking up how to write this or that. Um, Also finding like some good online software that kind of does the work for me. I personally use Bonsai. It'll write up like a little cookie cutter contract for you. Then you can edit it if you want. Does my taxes and it also does time tracking, which I'm personally very bad at keeping track of my time working. So I love it for that.
Mine is a combination of a few different things. My background is actually in political science, so I was very familiar with contracts, unfortunately. But that was really helpful, number one, to just kind of make sure you cover all your bases and also your clients. So, shared risk, all of that, or however much risk you're actually assuming versus the client. It's really important to note that. At the time, too, my now husband was also freelancing. And so I got a lot of stuff from him in terms of just like some boilerplate contracts that I've kind of since expanded. And lastly, when I first started, very helpful was the Freelancers Union. They just have a lot of like resources on there. I actually found them because I think they were doing something about like health insurances for freelancers at the time. So anyway, yeah, wealth of information on there.
Yeah, so like others, I have not come from a traditional background, but I am very frugal. So I've got into finance from a young age when I started doing bartending and everything at 18. And so I kind of understood the fact of like taxes and being up to date with that. And especially with COVID, I started seeing how they were changing taxes. And so I did mostly online research within that. Within everything else, I agree, you definitely need to have a mentor. They are going to be able to tell you like the ins and outs of not only just how to work with people, how to set things up, like your SRWs, your PRDs, how it is that you do your pricing, how it is that you are articulating yourself and really putting yourself first to make sure that nobody's lowballing you on anything. They are going to be the ones that will tell you all the tips and tricks, especially within their own experiences to go off of, rather than just reading through Reddit or through the internet and essentially just trying to piece it together. It's really easier if you have someone mapping out the story for you. Um, and then just like keeping up to date with how things are changing, especially just within finances all the time and within inflation and how things are being affected by that. But if you just have like a foundational template and you can build off of that and gain some experience within what it is that you're looking at, your mentor should be able to also help you piece that together so it's easier as you move through it. So yeah, most of it was just mentee and then other ones just self-research.
Wow, that was such a wealth of information. Thank you all so much. And if anyone needs, one of the things that was mentioned was the Freelancers Union and Bonsai, which we put into the chat. So the next question is going to be, what is the biggest lesson you learned while navigating contracts as a freelancer?
I think this kind of goes back to a previous question. I think advocacy, once again, is like really is the biggest lesson because at the end of the day, you are offering a service and you don't want to, be lowballed and you don't want to, give away that service for free. And um, I think that like from my experience, the lesson really is just being able to have that confidence to ask for the right asking rate or advocate on like the scope so that you're absolutely sure what you're getting done and they're not like trying to like change plans or anything like that. I think every UX designer or freelancer kind of has that moment with a client where they want to try to like change things midway and you might feel obligated to, capitulate because they are offering you money for your services, but at the end of the day, you are the person that is in control. So I think that that is like that sort of confidence to advocate for yourself is always going to be what prevents you from having unsavory experiences while freelancing.
Pretty embarrassing story for my answer. Um, and this kind of will apply to someone who's, starting out. I was interviewing with someone for a potential client. I had made up a contract, thought it was great. I sent it off to them. They sent it back with a few like revisions. One was just they wanted like the non-solicitation part of the contract to be extended a bit. That's fair. And then at the end, they were like, by the way, you misspelled the name of our company. So I would say just double, triple, quadruple check, make sure, you know, everything in there is how you want it to be.
Um, for me, contracts wise, is to have a kill switch. I did not always have this, and I learned the very hard way when a client basically like ran with the product and didn't pay the final invoice. And so now I like have a just like a piece of verbiage in there that says you'll get full rights to the product, you'll get, you know, full access, all the things. Transfer of ownership becomes yours, like once everything is paid. And then I think I had added in there that I reserve the right to pause work until any, you know, previous invoices have been, until they're all settled.
Yeah, for me, it was mostly being able to establish boundaries and being comfortable with saying no. And a lot of that stems from like the guilt that you have, especially when you are in the very beginning. You are so grateful to have somebody who has recognized your talents and that is willing to work with you and is actually willing to pay you, that you will go above and beyond for them. And even within that, people will recognize that. And like inherently, like humans are very greedy in nature. So like we will take as much as we possibly can, and if you can't like pull the plug, it's just going to be more and more of your time. So like that lesson of putting up boundaries and being firm with your time and understanding the value behind it is really important. And I had to learn that the hard way, especially because I'm a people pleaser, and just someone saying like, "Oh, how about we like spin this off? Can we iterate a little bit more? Can we do more here?" And one project that ended up being, you know, 1 week long ended up being a month long, and it didn't pay me for the value of it. So definitely understanding the limits and being okay with saying no, understanding that opportunities will still come to you, and it's completely okay to value yourself and not have to continue to do more. So that was my biggest lessons.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much. And yes, I think a lot of us can probably identify with people pleasing. It's very, very hard to get over, especially when you're freelancing and just starting out. I will say, especially when you're first starting out, you've got to keep up those boundaries, even if you're trying to get your first gig. So for the panel, how do you handle setting rates and other financial aspects of freelancing?
Yeah, so I do think it depends on the client, but I would say for like clients dealing with like small businesses, startups, anything like that, that's a more straightforward kind of answer. And I think not only are you going based off of your experience, so like for me, like out of college, there's like kind of a set rate for a junior designer, and then you kind of set that kind of hourly rate. Usually you do hourly because you're pretty much working hourly, so you want to be compensated for how much time you're spending. And then you also want to like factor in, you know, how like the scale of the project. So even if you have like that kind of set rate, there might be like additional costs based off of like how far the scope of the project goes, or if they I guess want you to do things that might be out of your purview, but you know that's obviously something you can negotiate. I mentioned that because I do front end development, so that's a completely different rate. So you want to be mindful of, you know, setting exactly where you are based off of your experience, but also for your role. But I would say that's something that I'm also still learning. So I'd like to hear from the other panelists with more experience.
For me, I do tend to just do hourly because I'm afraid of scope creep and end up doing more work than I wanted to. I usually have like a base hourly rate, and then we'll kind of just talk with them through that. I'm willing to change it based on the scale of the project or how long the project's going to be. Um, and usually to get a good idea of that, when I have like an initial call, I'll kind of take down all of the information they gave me and then make up like a little project plan in FigJam with like my estimates of how long it's going to take. Usually they either agree to that or they kind of realize they didn't give me all the information. And so that kind of helps it along with figuring all that out. In case I have, yeah, in case I have to negotiate that again.
I have a few, I feel like, strategies that I go back and forth on depending on the context. So one of the things that I like to do is calculate like how much it actually, or how much do I need like in a month total, right? So like, and that's kind of covering like obviously like rent or mortgage and whatever else that's like, your taxes and if you're putting away anything for retirement, all, and obviously also like subscriptions and everything that you're paying for as a business expense. And then from that, knowing that number, then now I know kind of like what my hourly rate should be. And I kind of have that honed down, but I do have like a sliding scale almost of like, it kind of, number one, as everyone had said, it depends on the client. Like if a client is not really able to like make the investment, but I really want to work with them for some, like if I really like what they're about, or they are like an organization or a cause that I really care for, or like really want to make a contribution to, then there is a little bit of flexibility in that. Also, I think it was Eve who said it. I kind of can come also like uh, from a front end, what's it called? Sorry, position. So obviously that hourly rate is going to be a little bit different. But I think, yeah, number one is like really knowing what you need to sustain yourself is like so key, because otherwise we're just guessing, right? We're just guessing and we don't know what actually is the kind of money that you need in order to survive and sustain yourself. Number two, like having like different pricing models. I like to I think when it all really comes down to it is hourly. Like I still track my hours and make sure like I'm within that. But when I pitch, I'll do like a low end and a high end in a scope, right? So it's like I would do just like what they asked for, and then I would do one where like what they asked for, and I think other things that they need, and then it becomes a conversation. And also, when I present that scope, I do it as like a range, and I say like it's proposed as a range um, to account for unforeseen changes and like scope creep, right? So it's like I know that scope creep can happen. They know scope creep can happen. It's like we're deciding to call out the elephant in the room, like right then and there, and making room in the budget so that we're all aware and there's like no surprises. Um, but yeah, I think it's always like a constantly like a moving target depending on the market, all of that, and like what other people are paying for. So yeah, I think having like a range that you're comfortable working with and you can kind of like adjust your deliverables in that, I think is a good way to go about it.
Yeah, so it's definitely what other people have been getting to. Essentially, it was like having a conversation and really understanding the pricing that is set within the area, within the experience that you've had in your role and things like that. So right now, because I am like full time with Walmart, I will set my pricing, my rates like outside of what I get paid within Walmart, because I'm dedicating more of my time and effort into it. So it's easier for me to have a baseline. But even when I was doing more so on the freelancing side, and even right now as I'm freelancing, there are rates in which I'm setting based on that pay range. And so I do evaluations of, the position that I'm in within the area. So if I'm a senior UX designer, I'm looking at what other senior designers are getting paid for. I'm also looking at, generally what it is that they're looking to get out of me. If I'm having a conversation with them and they're leaning more towards in the UI side, then I can articulate from that standpoint what it's going to take for me to complete this, web design. If it's more so from I need you to come in and I need you to do an whole audit and figure out where things are going wrong, then it kind of falls more into the PM range. And so I will like combine rates within what I know as a designer with what I know as a PM, because normally when I go onto projects, I set the expectation before I entered into it that I have this onboarding doc that I need you to fill out so I understand how things are working, how we can communicate and collaborate better, and we can set the tone for that. So that way, when it comes to the scope creep or anything else, when we're accounting for it at the very beginning, when we're setting our price, we understand that it's not going to be wasted resources within the scope based off of the fact that they couldn't have any of their information articulated or put out for me. So when I set the prices, I usually do at least 3 templates. The first template is based off of like working with smaller LLCs, small business, working with mid-sized startups, and then working with corporations like with Walmart. And those pricing sheets usually will vary between hourly, either between like, having a retainer with the company and setting so many hours per month of working with them. It really just depends, because especially in this market, a lot of what I've experienced is essentially people are wanting to work with people one-on-one. They want more in-house, but they don't want to give benefits to in-house. And so there are negotiations that you can have with an understanding, how much money are they getting in from investments? So how can you price yourself based off of that? Because that stuff is public information. You can also look into if they have equity for you. So say you really do like them as a cause and they can't pay you up front for this, you can still gain equity from them. You can still take investments into the company, so you're still getting something out of it. So there's different ways to evaluate it, but I always will try to have 3 different pricing templates to understand it from like a very granular perspective. If I'm only working on this one piece, so maybe I can price it at a little bit of a lower rate because I'm doing this for a better cause, and this is also the other outcome I can have. And then the other ones go off of essentially how much time am I going to be investing into it, and am I actually going to need to do more mental support, more PM support? So it just varies, but it's definitely a conversation to have.
Yes, amazing, amazing, amazing points. Excellent. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, and to Celeste's point, something that I like to do is like when you do the packages is to like maybe depending on the client, adding a little bit of personality into it. So you could have like a base, a middle, and then I call like my highest one pie in the sky, where I give them everything that they could possibly want and be like, this is the highest option. And a lot of times they'll go for it when you detail out like everything that they will get from that. So that's really important too. Like everyone was saying, like really detail out what they're going to get from those packages. Um, and our next question is, do you freelance through an agency or are you self-employed? What are the pros and cons of each if you've done both?
Yeah, so for me, so far, I have been self-employed most of the time, which kind of means that you're kind of handling all of your own finances as well as like taxes. So you have to be very mindful of how much time you're putting into your work as well as like what you're bringing in before you get like a statement at the end of the year. So it's very much like full hands on deck, whereas with an agency, it's usually a bit more handled, like more structured. I was working with an agency for a very short amount of time at the beginning of the year. I am also currently um, under a contract right now. So it is very different in the sense of like it's just more structured, I would say. Um, I guess the preference is really up to um, what you're more comfortable with. I think being self-employed can be helpful, but I think if you're looking for more stability, obviously, like having an agency can be a better option. But that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, as someone that's kind of only been in an agency environment for about a month, and prior to that, I was just self-employed. My goal always was to end up with an agency because I do like that you still are technically kind of a team. You'll have people there to support you if you want. Like when I've started my current job, I've been given work, but I've also been told, hey, if this is too much for you, let us know, we can work with it. Whereas when you're self-employed, you might end up putting up too much on your plate and you just kind of have to go with it. But I think the pro also of self-employed is, you can kind of choose who you're working with, whereas now it's like I didn't choose this client. So it's just kind of like, you know, bit of freedom there or, a little help with an agency.
I have done both, and I wouldn't say that I have like a preference. I think they both came into my circle like when I needed them the most. So always grateful for that. Pros and cons of each. Pros with, if you're just by yourself, you're you gonna call the shots, and cons is you call the shots, right? I feel like that's always like a double-edged sword right there. And then working through an agency, it was really really fun because I also you don't feel as siloed. You can kind of have at least like a pseudo team that you work with. Um, I guess the con for me would be I never really knew too much about the project. I only knew what was given to me. And so I had to make decisions based on just the information that I had versus if I was self-employed and or if I was just doing it for myself, I kind of had the liberty to like ask better questions, ask more things, like get on calls with decision makers and kind of get to the bottom of things quicker versus like when I feel like when I was working at that specific agency, I was just kind of like at the receiving end of things all the time. And feedback would come and like, okay, great, we don't like this, so but why? And so it was a lot of like trial and error to kind of see like what their working style is, like how do I get buy-in from them? Yeah, it was just it had some detours, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so I've primarily spent most of my career as a freelancer working self-employed. A lot of that stems from when I worked as like a contractor within companies. I did like working with some of the agencies that I did, but a lot of agencies aren't transparent on the cut that they're taking. And I don't necessarily have to be in control, but I do want to be knowledgeable about what it is that I'm like working for. And a lot of people aren't necessarily as candid with that, but with agencies, it's better, especially if you're starting out, mostly not in the sense of like how much you're getting paid. It's good to actually have that foundational piece and have them set it for you so that you know it's at least coming in or you know what's happening. So that's like sound mind, but it is definitely better within an agency if you can communicate and work with other people so that you can grow your skills, be more comfortable, and especially within advocating for yourself and knowing what other people are being paid or just being able to have candid conversations. Because like if you're self-employed and you're doing this by yourself, there's a lot more unknowns and things that you're having to work with. And then you're also really isolated and doesn't really feel like you have a whole lot of support outside of what you're giving yourself. So I always prefer to mostly just do the self-employed because I want to know where my finances are going and how things are being handled and kind of have that responsibility of myself. But I definitely see the pros of being within an agency, especially starting out.
Amazing, thank you. And the next one is these next couple questions are going to be a little bit more about your journey and how you've navigated being a freelancer in UX and your story. So, what is the biggest challenge you faced while freelancing in UX, you'd say? Challenge or challenges? And how have you navigated it for them?
Um, I think something that comes to mind is when working with clients, especially, I think as a freelancer, you're kind of generally like maybe not as specialized yet. So at least for me, I've kind of teetered around like different sorts of clients and like industries. And I think my project with like the AI startup that is in like government procurement was pretty much like a challenge for me to like understand what goes into government procurement and like what are like federal contractors and what is an RFP. So I had to do a lot of research and like understanding what that is and what would a design system look like for people um, uh, interacting with that sort of platform. So I was very much like learning a lot from the founder, as well as doing a lot of research into like sam.gov and understanding like where all this like data comes from and all the information and why it's relevant to these like R&D teams. So I think my biggest challenge is kind of getting that sort of like understanding of what those UX needs are and like how that defines what you're designing, because obviously the founder or whoever you're working with is going to have an idea or a vision, but a lot of the times we get clients who are not so specific, or they kind of leave things really open-ended, and they kind of leave you to deal with like at least the aesthetic changes and what things should look like. So my issue has really been with like really deciding how do I decide how things look, especially when you're setting like the foundation for like a pre-seed startup, or if you're setting like the foundation for like someone's like new portfolio, or like just these sort of like projects where like maybe the client doesn't fully know what they want and you kind of have to like pull it all together. So that's something that I've kind of been able to learn with more so research and more so like just finding as much inspiration as possible, looking at what is tried and true, like what are like the standards in the industry. So that's my experience.
Kind of similar for me. Biggest thing, and because like as I said earlier, I'm a boot camp grad, and I had boot camp projects, but a lot of the stuff that I know today is from learning on the job and just kind of like teaching myself and validating my own designs. So just kind of making sure that, you know, I'm doing everything I need to do for the client, and that the client understands what I'm doing also. Also kind of a side answer has been like making the client understand what I do. Um, I definitely am not front end. I don't know anything about code. So, but I've been in a lot of situations where I've been interviewing for a potential client and they just kind of assumed that's what I did. So I would have to, advocate and definitely spell out in my contracts that I work in like visual UI and design systems.
Um, Biggest challenge. Oh man, so many. I'm just kidding. But not really kidding, which is sad. But anyway, I think even Taylor kind of touched a little bit on this of like, I think for me, it's kind of wrapping my head around how the entire mechanism works. And so because I feel like I would need to start from the top in order to ask the right UX questions. And also like which specific UX questions, right? And are they tied to something? Are they tied to um, a tangible like goal, like, I don't know, sales or conversions or something like that? I feel like there could be, there's so many questions to ask. And I think a lot of the challenge when, especially like if you're freelance, is I think it's great if you are able to work at like enterprise level. But I think even like medium to large size companies, if they have not ever really explored UX or like think about product in that sense, I think there's a lot of convincing. There's a lot of convincing that happens in order to get them to understand what you're trying to do so that you could be effective at your job, so that you could deliver what you told them that you were going to deliver, but they're not aware of what that is. Because UX is like to them, or, I feel like if you're not a UX practitioner or if you're not in the industry, UX is kind of vague, right? Like I always get asked the difference of like what's the difference between UI, UX, and research, and there's so many, like they're intertwined and they all work together. And I also think the challenge is different companies define UX differently, right? Like there are companies who like maybe there's only like two of you designers and you're doing everything, or you could be one out of 100 and the only UX component that you are working on is maybe like A/B testing a layout or like a specific, you know, conversion speed or something like that. And so, yeah, I think the challenge is that there are so many different definitions depending on like the company that you work with, and you kind of have to help them define that, um, because they're not going to be able to do it 100%. Or maybe the expectation is very different from what you thought you were kind of walking into. Um, but yeah, I think it's always an exercise of communication and trying to understand where the other person is coming from and what ultimately the problem is that everybody is trying to solve in this group.
Yeah, so a lot of those points were really excellent. I'm going to be piggybacking off of a couple of them. So when I entered into my design career, I was actually initially, I started off in COVID, like many, and I was going to go up to school to become a physical therapist. And then I joined a boot camp. And this boot camp did not prepare me in any which way for what I was going to be facing in the design world. And it really hit me like a truck, I would say, when I entered into enterprise because they work differently and how it is that you are showing up, how it is that you are articulating your presence. A lot of that stuff you have to learn really quickly and you have to be a commanding presence in the room. So my biggest challenge is really articulating what it was my role on the team that I was coming in to prove because most people unfortunately view us as screen monkeys, where mostly we come in, we just design stuff that's really pretty, and then like they don't see the rest of the work that we put into it. So that's kind of why I've gravitated more towards the analytical side of things and really working in tandem with PMs because they have more weight than I do. But if I'm able to articulate it in the same way from a business perspective and I'm able to put it in the way that the business cares about, which is mostly within where your resource is going and how is this solving a problem for them, then it's definitely been beneficial for me to do that. But the articulation side, especially coming into things, like it is very nerve-wracking, especially if you're more introverted, more quiet, and you don't know how to ask the right questions. It's just something that you have to learn very quickly, whether you're doing self-research, whether you are watching other designers, having mentors who are working with you. That articulation thing is a make it or break it. And if you can't step up to the plate in terms of how it is that you are communicating, then it's not going to be successful. So that was definitely something that I had to learn the hard way and had to grow in terms of how I was communicating with my stakeholders.
100%, 10 out of 10. And how do you, so this is the second to last question for this portion. How do you, this is something that I've struggled with a lot, so I'm really eager to hear everyone's answers about this because I've had to find my own ways. How do you gain support or seek advice? You know, seek advice, get feedback loops without a permanent team to kind of continually talk to and bounce things off of.
Yeah, so I think once again having support groups like this, Philly Kai as well as AIGA once again has helped me find like the sort of like confidence to go into new contracts or to find new roles or to find resources that I need. That is really the best way to have to like really get the support that you need as well as like on top of that, having someone closer to you as a mentor to kind of watch you grow and that sort of support as a freelancer really does help. I think almost like every UX like freelance person that I know is has like a mentor, even no matter like how old they are, they have like someone older than them that's like helping them through like new, journeys with their career. And I think that, at least for me, that's been like the most um, important part of keeping me sane through like, weird client interactions or like even like looking for new work. Having someone else that like understands it a bit better has definitely helped me to, stay sane and also just like figure things out. Like things do work out. How things are now, it does get kind of stressful. So having that support, especially even not just like logistically, but socially support, that's really important to have.
Yeah, kind of same situation. I did the mentorship program that Philly Kai and AIG I did last year, and I'm still in contact with my mentor. Um, Having that support's good. Also, in terms of like support and just self-employment freelancing in general, other freelancers, I came from the photography industry, so I knew a lot of people that kind of were in the same situation as me with like self-employment, finding clients. It just wasn't necessarily for the same thing, but we were on the same page with a lot of stuff. So, getting to know other freelancers in other fields can be helpful too, I think.
Um, Plus one for having mentors, definitely. What I have found is more effective for me is having or like hiring a coach. Um, I am currently working with a design systems coach, actually. You are aware of him, Dan Mall. He's pretty big and well known in the design systems world. And I think that for every level of freelance that I was in, I was working with a coach at one point or another. I had like a what's it called? I had a more like foundational coach in the beginning, and then I transferred, and then I had was working with someone who was like freelancer and then turned into like an agency owner because I thought that that was the route that I wanted to do. Um, and then, that's been years now. And then now I'm in dance program, and it just helps to kind of number one, um, because I feel like with coaching groups too, there's typically like a community. And so like I get to talk to other, not just like product designers, like agency owners and, people who do motion and people who do just do design system workshops, um just do animation. And so it's really cool to kind of be in a group where Taylor had said it earlier. It's like there's some overlap in what you do, even though you're not like all in the same lane. And also like having office hours with somebody who is just um, such a pro. I can't really explain it. It's just he has like such a wealth of knowledge, not just from like the design side, but like from a business perspective. And yeah, like I think having a coach was really advantageous for that. Because I feel like it to me, it's kind of like going to the gym. If like I paid for it, like I'm gonna go. So yeah, a little bit of skin in the game helps.
Yeah, so definitely going off of mentorship, that is probably the best way for you to have support for yourself and having direct contact with somebody so that you don't feel alone. It's also really just nice to have somebody to vent to because most of the people that I still have mentorships with are mostly just people who are going back and forth about our jobs and about the stuff that we have. So it's nice to be able to vent, relax, and form those relationships. Um, I also do stuff in a very like random way where I will reach out to people and just start having conversations where I'll see something that's like really awesome on their part and I want to engage and just try to have those very fluid, very open conversations and like just trying to not only just expand my network but also gain knowledge from whatever area of expertise they have. And a lot of it also just stems from random events. So I was previously based in Austin and everybody comes to Austin for whatever reasons, and so they gravitate there. And so you'll meet people just doing two-stepping, going out swinging, anything like that, swinging as in dancing, not the other thing. But there are just a lot of things that you can get out there and be a part of. And one of the things that I realized at the very beginning was if you try to get support within your own space, just within design. It's great, but a lot of the people within design can't do much outside of it because there are other people and factors controlling it. So I try to gain support within like product spaces, within talking with the business, within going with engineers. So I try to split up between the people that I am working around and like collaborating with, not necessarily one-on-one every single day, but at least to the extent where they can see the kind of work I'm putting out there, they can validate it, they can validate what I'm doing. They can also give me different perspectives based off of their own 2 cents and their roles. So where I can seek out more advice and try to expand. But definitely just being out there as much as possible, even on social media, and which is definitely jarring for a lot of people to put yourself out there, even just posting on LinkedIn. But you can definitely gain support as well as haters. It just kind of depends on how you're perceiving it. But anytime you make yourself more and more visible, the more support you gain, the more people will seek you out, and the more things will come to you.
Excellent. Yes, I agree with that too, because I've had a thing where every time I listen to a podcast episode like an NNG, or I had an Interaction Design Foundation one once, and I really resonate with the person that's speaking, I'll just reach out to them in LinkedIn. And 99% of the time, they're interested in talking to you and having a conversation and are usually excited to talk about it. So if you hear someone talking about something or an expert, just reach out to them on LinkedIn. You've got nothing to lose. They're probably going to want to talk to you. And you also will have networking for the future, as we've talked about, for future gigs possibly. So excellent advice. And can you, oh, this is the last one. Obviously, as freelancers, like a lot of work from home jobs, a lot of freelance jobs are work from home, a lot of freelance jobs are without a team. It's really, really easy to get burnt out or feel isolated because of those things. So can you talk about like what your work-life balance has been like freelancing and how you avoid feeling isolated while you're working as a freelancer?
Yeah, so work-life balance is pretty interesting while freelancing because at least for me, I usually don't have a like a strict schedule, so I kind of have to make up my own schedules most of the time. Even right now, I'm on a contract, but my hours aren't set in stone, so I can work whatever time, but I do choose to still get up early in the morning so I can get work done before the end of the day because the life balance part is actually important to me, and I still spend a lot of time with my community and going to lots of events. So not just like networking events and tech events, but I also try to go to like more like fun events with my friends, concerts and like um, something I've been enjoying recently is Wooden Shoe Bookstore has a lock picking night every month. So uh, yeah, so on Friday nights I'll go to that with some friends if like or I'll go alone, but like, either way, I try to like keep myself as busy as possible. Like every week I'm my schedule is usually pretty full. Even before this kind of arrangement, I mentioned that I was a host for Code and Coffee Philly, and that was a Saturday afternoon activity for me to like meet more software developers as well as like work on more projects in that time. So that was like something that kept me busy on the weekends and also kept me kind of focused on a schedule. So I feel like the isolation problem hasn't been an issue for me personally, specifically because I just keep up with my community and make sure that like I know what's going on. Like there's so many resources for like event calendars, um, for all types of like initiatives and groups around the city. So there's in my opinion, like there's so many ways to like keep yourself like in tune and like socializing so you don't get burnt out.
I will say I can be kind of bad at this with the work-life balance. I love putting too much on my plate. But that kind of goes back into something I said a while ago about how freelancing is definitely an exercise in self-discipline. Just being conscious about yourself, like, am I taking care of myself? Am I taking, both physically and, mentally, emotionally, consciously making plans with people so that I don't end up just working through the whole weekend because I didn't think about it.
I try very hard to keep pretty strict working hours, and it's something that I also like communicate with my clients a lot. Not in a very like don't ever, but just like, hey, this is like outside work hours, so I'm gonna respond tomorrow or whatever. Even though I'm literally like responding then, and then I'm like schedule sending it for tomorrow morning. I think it just kind of helps with the message that I'm trying to send. And then I'm pretty, I right now I'm also building like another business. And so I kind of do that. Um, it's definitely like not a 9 to 5, 5 to 9 kind of thing. I kind of like keep everything within 9 to 5 or like 8 to 5, whatever that is. And also realizing that I definitely have seasons. So there are going to be seasons where I am very motivated to work. I have a lot of energy and I want to get stuff done because I know that I'm going to have a season where I don't want to do anything. I'm probably going to work like 3 hours that day, just literally get the bare necessities done, to keep the needle moving. And so knowing that now about myself, I kind of know that I'm gonna have like a big push period where I'm go, go, go. I love this. I'm gonna keep doing it. And then I'm gonna have a low period. And then I'm gonna want to rest all the time or like just not push so hard. So I think that for me, what helps is instead of thinking about it like in a to day basis or like week to week basis, I think about it almost like in quarters. Um, and that kind of helps. And then to avoid feeling isolated, I try to be, in like multiple groups. I'm on the board of Creative Mornings. I am a member of AIGA, although I haven't really gone to any of like the events, and I really want to. And saying yes, or like, saying yes to things like this. I think that even though this is virtual and we're not actually like doing it in person, it's still much better than not getting to talk to people. So yeah, definitely keeping things light, keeping things fresh, and switching things up.
Yeah, so I definitely struggle with the work-life balance when it comes to freelancing because my brain will go into override and basically be like, hey, so if you are doing this aspect and this is down and you finish the work, how is it that you are going to be obtaining more work or promoting yourself more, or like what else can you be doing to excel your career? Because especially with like freelancing, nothing's really set in stone and you are actively working on, you're defining your own business, so there's always more that you can be doing. So within that, what I started doing was essentially setting timers because I'm one of those people that will just like dial in and go throughout the entire day without eating. So setting up timers and reminders to break, going out for a walk, especially having dogs, is really helpful to break up my rhythm, and to just try to reset. And also framing every single day that work is not important. It's important for you to gain money and for you to live the life that you want, but it is not the primary thing in your life. So understanding like when you're going into it, like it's just another day, just get this done, have an agenda set, definitely does help you split things up and to understand what's important. And then again, having just those little breaks to break out of your groove is really helpful. Um, the isolation feeling, mostly if I am working with clients and doing stuff every day, I can just keep going and I find myself enjoying just the quiet more so, like especially during the holiday seasons, I'm happy not to actually talk with people. But when I'm feeling down or I feel like I don't have any growth, I mostly just try to go out and have conversations with neighbors. I will go and get online with people that I'm aware or that I'm friends with. And then I will just hit social media and I'll start commenting with people. I'll just try to do anything where I feel like I am engaging and I'm being active in what I need to do. But I will say it does circulate around growth within the design field, within how I'm presenting myself in my business. So there is like certain on and off switches. But for me, it's mostly like it does this click with what it is that I'm trying to achieve and like being okay with just continuing to go, and establishing like just breaks in between.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. These are such wonderful pieces of advice. I love hearing about what everyone kind of does to manage their stress and burnout. So thank you. And now we are at our Q&A time. So I'm going to hand it over back to Casey, and she's going to read out some of the questions that you all have been asking in the chat. for our panelists. And then after that, we will move to wrap up.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for sticking around. Again, please stick around. We do have a raffle. We are raffling 3 Rosenfeld books of your choice from a list that we will send to you via email, and you will pick out that book. It's like a PDF we'll send to you. Um, for the questions, the first question we had, I'm sorry, I don't remember like who asked them. I was keeping a note of them. So just please, sorry, I'm like, where was I keeping a note of those? Oh my goodness. Um, help
The
somebody.
joys of Zoom.
Someone asked the
The
first
joys of Zoom.
question. Um, uh,
We can ask the
all
really
right,
hardcore
let's ask
one.
the one that's getting a lot of buzz is, I think one of the more recent ones was, should you learn coding? Can you use AI for coding? What languages should you learn if you should learn coding?
I think I have a lot of opinions on this because vibe coding is pretty big. I'm currently working for an AI lab where I am vibe coding all day, but I feel like um, my issue with going straight into vibe coding is that we are seeing a lot of apps being built without security, without understandings of like the real like backbones of like why does this work? Like how is it doing this? And I think that, you're doing yourself a favor by at least understanding the bare bones. I would say like being more so front end, the extent of that is like the very basic HTML, CSS. HTML is like how websites are pretty much like seen. But it's also the CSS is the styling. So like CSS is probably like as a UX designer, you're probably going to like at least see it, or you might be touching on it. Maybe the developers might be handling that, but they might need like information from you on like how to use CSS. So in the sense of like what type of styling they will be coding into the websites. So like having that bare bone like foundation really sets you up for like a good understanding. But from there, most websites now are based off of I would say React and I guess a bit of TypeScript. So learning JavaScript is probably like your like biggest skill point. So like I would say HTML, CSS first because it's the easiest to get out of the way, but like JavaScript is kind of like a never-ending kind of language to get into, but it's still like every website right now is based off of React. So you want to learn React. Um, I outside of this contract, I haven't had experience with vibe coding, so I haven't used it in my experience, like with working with like outside projects, but it is useful. But at the end of the day, like if you're going to be vibe coding, you're probably going to be you're going to need to implement changes yourself, which means that you're going to have to look at the code and fix some things and move things around. So eventually you're going to learn in my opinion, you're probably going to pick up some things. That's kind of like how I learned how to code pretty much in middle school because I was like on Tumblr making websites, and that's how I learned CSS. So like I learned it in a backwards way. I didn't take a class for it, but eventually I picked it up, and so you'll pick it up through vibe coding, but having that foundation will help you understand it a lot better.
Just going to chime in really quickly to what Eve said too, because I also went in it backwards. Um, I got into it because I was blogging about coffee, and I just wanted to make my blog look really cool. And then that's kind of how I started learning HTML, like because it's foundational, and then CSS because I wanted to dress it up. And then you kind of get into, other functionalities, and then you learn JavaScript, and then you learn React. And I think, like, would there be, kind of going back to the question of like, would there be any benefit to learning it now? I think so, because it also allows you to communicate better about the code. And like, I think she had touched up on this earlier. Um, it allows you to, especially for like, handing it off to like devs or like engineers, you can kind of speak to even like just the design language, just like the CSS, right? If you're not going to be in there like troubleshooting the code itself, like you could at least share some verbiage so that you can communicate better about it. But I do think that it is a good skill to have. I still use front end my front end skills like here and there. Definitely not as much as I used to, but it comes in handy.
Cool. I guess we can move on to the next question. I don't think like unless Olivia or Taylor, you guys want to chime in, you don't need to as well. Like we can all just like handle the other questions. Whoever wants to chime in, if that makes sense. Cool. Okay, next question. So this came really early on in the conversation. Have any of you guys run into workplace culture issues? Um, like I want out of here type of issues. That's the way it was phrased.
I'll take a snap. Um, so yes, there's definitely every environment that you enter into, you need to kind of read the room. Especially as designers, we're not necessarily seen as valuable as other areas within the company. And just from my standpoint, I've mostly worked within companies that with their IT. And then if I worked within startups, it was mostly like you had just the lead or the CEO, and then maybe you have like one engineer and then somebody else who's dictating like a PM. Um, so there's definitely like grievances to address within how people are interacting with you and how you're being perceived. Most of it is just like if you take it with a grain of salt and you don't see it as being offended, like off the bat, or people are coming at you really harshly, because I'm also facing some of that within my own job at Walmart, just because there are cultural differences, people coming from different backgrounds, people seeing different genders and different lights of how they are supposed to be speaking to them. So a lot of that is mostly like if you initially react to it, it's going to be really harsh coming back to you. So you just assess like maybe they don't understand it, like you're kind of thinking them as a child, and then you see how the pattern keeps going up, and by like the second or third time, then you can address it. So mostly my advice is just to read the room and make sure that like people understand that they can't walk all over you, and it's okay. But to definitely try to at least like have some kind of foundation and like lack of assumption before you just go in there.
I think a lot of it is also just learning the office politics, which I hate to say, but yeah, a lot of it really is that, and learning when to react and how to react in a way that, I guess it just depends on what your end game is. Like if you're trying to get buy-in on something and you're getting pushback, and figuring out why there is pushback. And I one thing that's really helped me is talking to someone who's been at that org longer than I have, and just getting tips on like, hey, I feel like there's a lot of friction between me and this person. Like, I don't want to take it personally, but it's reading that way. Like, is this something that you've experienced, and like how have you kind of like addressed that on your end? And then I find out that like, no, this is just how this person is. It's totally not personal. And after I learned that, then I found ways to like be a little bit more to, I don't want to say get what I want, but to get him to make the decision. Like, don't ask open-ended questions. Just tell me like, I need you to choose between A and B. Please approve. And then we can kind of move forward. And it's totally like it was never a personal thing. That's just how his mind worked. And I think having that insider knowledge was super helpful.
Cool. Okay. I just wanted to move on to the next question because we have just a few and I want to make sure we're getting to all of them. So, um, can you explain how and when to raise your rates? Give some advice on how to have those conversations with your long-term clients as well.
I will say I've only done it once, but it was basically a conversation of this is the work I've been doing. My experience has gone up. This I can continue doing stuff. I continue can continue doing XYZ for you. I think I think I would want to have my hourly rate upped a little bit. Um, it was a successful conversation, but I did have to have a lot of like stuff to back it up, basically.
Yeah, so it's kind of like being perceived like if you go into if you work for 9 to 5 and you have a chance to negotiate a raise or get bonuses or anything like that. It's just a negotiation. And so even within like a company or corporate setup, you still need to come with receipts, which is basically validating all the things that you've done for the company, for your team, why it is that you can validate it between like metrics, or if you have like feedback, or if you have like customer reviews, whatever it might be, you still need to show up and have information that shows like my value has increased. For me, I've done it a couple of times now, and most of it comes from entering into, corporate positions because I do enjoy the full time with the benefits and everything with that. So it's mostly like my time is now limited and it's going to be limited to this. And if I'm going to be giving this effort into it, my price is going to raise because of this. And within that, I don't put it like in the sense where it's like you have to pay me now. I always will like negotiate and have conversations with them because just because I picked up more work, it's not fair on the client. So you never phrase it as in like now it's your problem. Like you always try to work with them. And I also will do it in the sense where if I'm working with people who are just getting too difficult, I will price them out. So some of that comes from just putting out like really egregious, like high prices. And if they go for it, like, cool, you get extra money. If they don't, then you no longer have to work with that client and they can validate not working with you. So just depends on the strategy and approach, but you always want to seem amenable to what it is or agreeable to what it is that they also counter with. And you also want to be upfront and transparent with them as into like why it is that you're moving in a direction of raising your price and like why you should still be validated to stay on with them and like your value with them.
All great points. I want to add another strategy that I've done in the past, which was before I raise my rates, I basically tell them like, hey, you know, come XYZ, my rate needs to change again, like, with the receipts. But it gives them a chance to like sign on for like the original rate that I had, and then the new rate would kick in like after that project was done. So it's kind of like it's like an easier transition for them to be like, well, we want to keep working with you. And so I think that's an easy, or I find success doing it that way and kind of easing them into the increase. Another thing that I've kind of done to validate an increase in price is also just like getting more certs, or like, if I'm paying for like membership to like a certain, I don't know, professional, I don't know, group or something like that where I'm learning a lot, they know for a fact that they are also going to benefit a lot from that. And so since they're not funding my continuing education, I am, then they can understand that like, okay, well, you go do what you need to do and then you let us know whatever, when that new rate is gonna kick in.
All awesome, sage wisdom that you guys have. The last question that we have here is, well, and Samantha, I'm sorry, you, Leah snuck in right before you. So if anyone wants to, answer, you guys have been doing an awesome job actually of answering the questions people have been posing in the chat. But the last question I'm going to ask for you from Leah is, how long did it take for you to land your first client from when you started to landing?
Uh, Trying to do the math. I finished my boot camp in May of 2022, and I didn't get my first job until March of 2023. So took a little while.
For me, I will say I'll count my client as being my long-term client, which was the startup. So that was through word of mouth. I was in my senior year of college last year, and that summer we came up with the contract. So it was while I was technically still in school. So like I graduated September 2024. So I started in like June 2024, so that was before I ended up graduating. But I would also say that afterwards, landing a contract after graduating, it took like 4 months.
For me, I was still doing my boot camp while I was working to be doing freelancing. I think it took me about 3 months, and that was mostly because, Upwork and other sites like that at the time were actually, useful. Now it's like really more saturated, so it's harder to get. But I got lucky within that aspect, but actually gaining a client just through a word of mouth was about 8 months, and then a full-time role was about 7. So I had like a bit of fluctuation within that. It definitely just depends on the market and how you're putting yourself out there and how often. But I definitely like had it a little bit easier, especially during the year I entered into the market.
Um, I don't remember the exact date, but I want to say it was probably like about 3 weeks. And it was also a very casual conversation. I was just behind the counter, and I told that my first client at the time, and without knowing that they were going to be my first client, I just said, "Yeah, I'm leaving, and I'm going to miss you guys so much, but I'm going to start my own thing." One conversation kind of like led to another, and then yeah, I'm pretty sure I like started like maybe 3 weeks to like a month after that.
I would like to jump in real quick and just add a little more to my answer. Yeah, it was about 7 or 8 months between me finishing and me finding my first gig. But as I mean, I wasn't really doing anything in the meantime. I was still learning. I was still like fixing up my boot camp projects. I was, making my own projects, kind of making my own work and kind of improving as much as I can so that when I did interview with people, I kind of felt in a more confident place than beforehand.